Good afternoon, everybody. I am Carrie Lafond. I'm the market president and publisher of the Milwaukee Business Journal, and I also help with Wisconsin Inno, which is a part of the American City Innos group that is all part of American City Business Journals. And many of you may know that we are sister organizations, but some of you may not know that Inno and the Business Journals are partners in this this quest to help businesses improve their business, advance their careers, and simplify their professional lives. So we work together on that. I am going to do some introductions of our panelists along with their bios. They're going to speak for just a few minutes. We have each one of them is going to speak for 8 to 10 minutes, and then we're going to open up the conversation to your questions, and I'm going to ask some questions as well. So be prepared to ask any questions, and if you'd like to do that while they're talking, just to keep that on your mind, you can go ahead and put that in the chat. And on Teams, the chat is that little bubble that is should be at the top of your screen, depending upon how you have your screen set up. So I'm going to introduce our panelists, and we're going to hear from Wayne Robson. He is the Acting Consul General of Canada in Chicago. We're going to hear from Joan Schmidt, who is the American Family Insurance Distinguished Chair in Risk and Wisconsin School of Business and co-leader of the Creative Destruction Lab, which sounds so fun, and I can't wait to hear more about that. And we're also going to hear from Dan Reed, who is a Managing Director of American Family Ventures. I'm going a little off script now because I am going to move our panelist, the participant introductions to after our comments, since I just had everybody turn their screens off. So Wayne, I'm going to ask for your comments first, please.
Sure, and thanks very much for the introductions, Kara, and thanks for all of you for joining us today. Really very much appreciated. One of the reasons why we at the Canadian Consulate General here in Chicago, which is responsible for our relationship with in the United States with Wisconsin, Missouri, and Illinois, is so interested in this event is basically the importance of the trade relationship between our two countries. No two nations depend more on each other for their mutual prosperity than Canada and the United States. We both benefit from our longstanding foreign policy and security relationship, but really the trade relationship is what underpins it all on an ongoing basis. We've got very resilient supply chains, which were tested a little bit over the last year under the pandemic. And we have a shared commitment to a number of things like fighting climate change and the North American integrated energy market. But underneath all of that is the trade data. And the trade data is that we do about $2 billion of trade a day between Canada and the United States. And so we do about $1 billion of that trade just around the Great Lakes, just the states and the provinces that touch the Great Lakes. That's $1 billion of trade a day. And to be perfectly honest, about 500 million of that goes over the Detroit bridge, just that single bridge. And so we did the numbers the other day just to try to figure out what does that mean if we were going to try to visualize it. That's an armored car worth of money going back and forth over the bridge every minute. Just to give you an idea of how much trade goes on between the two countries. And so, I mean, that just tells you how important the relationship is. But to bring it, forward in another way, Canada's the U.S.'s largest customer as well. Canada bought more goods from the U.S. in the last year than China, Japan, and the U.K. combined. And that's been the case for several years. And so, and I talked about the importance of the relationship here in the United States, our Consulate General in Chicago being one of our 13 missions in the US. Canada does more trade with these 3 states than we do with China, Japan, and the UK combined. And so that relationship is really a vibrant relationship and really important. And so that's why we have as many consulate generals as we have around the network. And most of my consulate general that I work with here in Chicago is dedicated to trade. We have people here in the Trade Commissioner Service that help introduce Canadians into the U.S. Network, but also help with Americans that are looking to find contacts in Canada. And we have what we call a Trade Commissioner Service, which is a confidential, free, without charge service that's available to all Canadian clients and to U.S. partners that we're working with. So they roll out the red carpet, and some of them are on the line today for helping with people that are interested in doing innovation or investment work with Canada. So that's their job. An example of that is, an event like Collision. Collision is a tech event that's going to be going on in Toronto in April 20th to April 22nd, I think is roughly the timetable for it. It's gone on a couple of times there already. The Trade Commission Service will help individuals here in the United States that want to virtually attend that event and help curate a program for them so they get the proper types of connections. Another example, which I'm going to turn most of this over to our other colleagues who know it well, is examples like working with incubators and accelerators, and one of them in particular, although we've worked with several, and I know there's some other people here on the panel that represent some other ones, but the Creative Destruction Lab, I think, is an excellent example of a nonprofit startup accelerator that takes a look at seed stage science and tech companies, whether they be in fintech or in other areas, and help them make connections across the border. Yesterday, to remind myself of the kinds of people that they had on there, I went through their mentor list, which was outstanding. I was particularly impressed with the fact that there was 2 astronauts in the program as mentors up in Toronto for their space program, but the RISC program in Wisconsin looks excellent as well. And I must admit that some of the content there, I will turn over to our colleagues, but definitely that Creative Destruction Lab's new partnership in University of Wisconsin-Madison and with AFI sounds really, really interesting. So I'll stop there in my discussion points and let you move on, but looking very much forward to this.
Before I move on, I want to share a little bit of Wayne's background so you can see where he's coming from. And so Wayne has a Bachelor of Arts in History from the University of British Columbia, Master of Commercial Law from Deakin University, the Graduate Diploma from the University of London, the Forum for International Trade Training, International Business Professional, Executive Leadership Certificate from Cornell. Mr. Robson has joined the Global Affairs Canada in 1991 and is currently the acting Consul General of the Consulate General of Canada in Chicago. He's previously held a number of positions in Canada, including the Regional Director of the Vancouver Regional Office responsible for the Pacific region, Director of the International Trade Finance Division, and Executive Director of the Multi-Sectors Practices Division in Ottawa. Served abroad as Second Secretary in Tokyo, First Secretary in Canberra, is that correct? Canberra. And Minister Counselor and Senior Trade Commissioner in Seoul, and Minister Counselor and Senior Trade Commissioner in the Canadian Embassy in Mexico, Consul General Canada in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. He is currently a member of the Board of Directors for the Forum for International Trade Training based in Ottawa. So Mr. Robson knows what he's talking about. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to introduce Joan Schmidt, and she's going to share a little bit of information about the organizations that she works with. Joan is the American Family Insurance Distinguished Chair in Risk from Wisconsin School of Business and co-leader Creative Destruction Lab in Wisconsin. Joan has been with the University of Wisconsin-Madison for over 32 years, previously served as an assistant professor at the University of South Carolina and did risk analysis for Rockwell Automation. She has her MBA in Risk Management and Insurance from Wisconsin School of Business and her doctorate in Insurance from Indiana University, Kelley School of Business. Joan, tell us about all of these things you are working on.
Well, thank you, Kira, and I'm delighted to be here. And of course, the trade is intellectual as well as material, and we have some of our students go to universities in Canada, and some Canadians come to the Wisconsin School of Business as well. And I'm delighted to be here. I think that you're hoping that I speak mostly about the Creative Destruction Lab, CDL for short. So I'll focus on that. CDL is the brainchild of Jay Agrawal, who's a faculty member at the University of Toronto. He teaches both management and entrepreneurship. And Jay, about 10 years ago, was trying to reflect on why so much innovation occurs on the two coasts, the Bay Area in California and the Boston area on the East Coast. And his thesis is, and I think that he's proved this to be true through CDL, is that it's not about money. Money exists anywhere. It's not about ideas. We can generate ideas around the globe. It's about judgment, that so many people who have been through initiatives and innovation live in the Bay Area and in Boston. And what he wanted to do was to bring that judgment to Toronto. And now it's expanded. But let me talk about what that means. It means that there are ventures who apply to participate in CDL. And those ventures meet with mentors. As Wayne indicated, we've been fortunate to invite mentors who come from all areas of risk and have tremendous experience. That experience is mostly about having had their own ventures and exited from them. So they've been through the experience that these new founders have. Or they are VCs, mostly at the highest level of the VC firm. And those VCs, of course, offer tremendous mentorship outside of CDL and within CDL as well. So these founders apply to be in CDL. We have the only risk stream among all the CDLs at Wisconsin. That's because of the partnership with American Family Insurance. And these ventures visit once every 8 weeks. And they're intense days where they're meeting with the mentors in small groups to describe what their venture is, and then to describe what their 3 objectives are to complete over the next 8 weeks. And the mentors try to be as helpful while being tough in these meetings, so that the founders, the founders have so many activities that they need to undertake, and they might not be prioritizing them appropriately. So we've got these mentors, and quite a few of them that meet with the founders, and they try to hone in on what do you need to do just in the next 8 weeks. And they do this for a series of 5 meetings. And then those are in the morning and in the afternoon. They meet as a whole and receive the feedback, generally speaking. And we talk about each of the ventures and give them support. And then at the end of the day, some of the ventures are not invited to come back. And the way that this works is that a mentor raises a hand to say, I will spend 4 hours at least with this founder in the next 8 weeks. And if no one raises a hand, then that venture is not invited back. So we started out with 20 ventures. We now have 12 that are continuing to the 4th session, which will be on May 7th. So this was started in Toronto, and it was so successful that Ajay moved it to other universities in Canada, and then to Oxford in the UK, and HEC in France, and then Georgia Tech, Wisconsin, and now University of Washington in the United States as well. So there are 10 universities that have CDLs. And as I indicated, we have the only one that's focused on the risk stream. One thing that people don't fully understand is that the intention of CDL is to stand beside, in collaboration with other incubators and accelerators. It's not really an incubator or an accelerator. It's about providing this judgment. So any of the founders can participate. I know that there are people from Generator here. They can participate in Generator and CDL, and we consider that to be a positive because they're not in competition. The founders don't pay any money. It's all funded through donations that are given to the university to make CDL work. So I know that the people who put this together wanted me to talk as well about why did the university accept the invitation to participate in CDL. And it was pretty easy to say yes. One reason is that the other co-lead is in computer science. So this allows us to work together between the School of Business and computer science. We also are the only program that does that. Every other program is housed solely in the School of Business. But we have this really wonderful collaboration with computer science. And isn't that where so much is happening, business and computer science? And then we invite students into a class so that every CDL is at a university, because there are students who work with the founders and participate in these sessions. And the idea is that the students may get jobs with these new startups, or they will develop their own entrepreneurial spirit. So the opportunity to work with computer science to enhance our entrepreneurship at the University of Wisconsin, and then to work with CDL, which is a really terrific organization, and there are others here to talk even more. I see Peter Gunder is here, and obviously Dan is going to talk about it as well. It's an amazing organization. And then to draw back many alumni who are mentors. Some of the founders are alumni as well, but then also some of the founders are from South Africa and from Luxembourg and around the globe, as well as located in the Midwest of the United States. And we'll even allow some Canadians in, depending on whether or not they're interested in risk. That's supposed to be a little joke. That's what I have to say. I'll turn it over to you, Kira, to invite Dan. I'm sure that there may be some questions, and I'm happy to answer those.
Yes, I am sure that we'll have some questions. And remember that you can, if you want to just keep track of your questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. We'll hold them off until Dan is done with his remarks, and then I'm gonna bring everybody up on the screen and have you introduce yourself. Dan, this is Dan Reed. He's the Managing Director of American Family Ventures. He's worked as a strategy consultant with the Boston Consulting Group and in various strategic roles at American Family Insurance. He has experience as a principal in 2 startup companies. Additionally, his work history includes hospital administration at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, and a career as a professional baseball player with the Baltimore Orioles. Yes, you can probably ask him some questions about baseball too. Dan holds an MBA with a concentration in strategic management from the University of Chicago and an undergraduate degree from Stanford University. Dan, why don't you share a few remarks with us?
Sure, Karen, and hi everyone. I know quite a few of you on the call, so it's nice to see your initials in little circles at the bottom of the screen. At American Family, we have been investing in startups in and around the insurance industry for a bit over a decade, since Peter Gunder, who's on the call, got us started with a local investment back in 2010. As the insurance industry has been transforming itself from the inside and from the outside, we've been casting a fairly wide net as an investor about where do we engage with these concepts and founders that can help define how insurance works over the next decade or so. So we certainly have a presence in Silicon Valley, but increasingly there's been a trend in the early stage startup space about other places. As the Valley gets prices get challenging to make a great return as an investor, and other communities build their startup environments and ecosystems with more and more maturity across the country and across the world. It's taken us to a lot of different places. You see a similar trend with the generators expansion across the Midwest and elsewhere. And for us, my journey with Canada started with a trip sponsored by the Consulate. I believe it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. It was a trip for investors who were interested in the Canadian ecosystem to go visit Toronto and Waterloo and understand what was happening up there. And for me, it was surprising. You think about all the blind spots that you have as an investor, and the maturity of the Toronto and Waterloo ecosystem in terms of startups and opportunities to invest was candidly sort of shocking to me. It was so significant in terms of the AI developments that are happening up there that I remember coming back and talking to Troy and Joe briefly about we should expand Generator up into the Waterloo ecosystem. But we invested in a company out of Toronto that's actually a participant in the CDL program now, but it helped us get to know that community a little bit better. And then Peter and I were working with the Jay Agarwal, who Joan mentioned is really the person who got CDL started back 10 years ago. But we were working with the Jay on the economics of AI and the effect of prediction capabilities on the insurance industry generally. And that relationship transitioned into sort of increased mutual interest, and when we had the opportunity to work with the J and with the UW on the CDL concept around risk, it just seemed like a perfect fit. So the program has gone really well. Joan and the team at the UW stood things up so quickly, and did so in the COVID environment when the school was going through some uncertainty around how things would work. So I have to give you a ton of credit, Joan, for fostering that through, and executing this program in this virtual environment has been just fantastic. So for us, we're really excited about CDL. We're excited about the continued growth of our relationships within the Canadian ecosystem and elsewhere, and just happy to be here. Actually should before I turn it back to you, Kira, Joan, maybe you want to mention the expansion of the CDL program in the future.
Sure. So we are planning to expand into the health stream. And you may know Richie Davis, one of the great minds in wellness. He has agreed to co-sponsor the CDL Health. And I think that what we're planning to do is take a resilience concept. And Dan, I haven't yet talked with you about this, but I think that fits with the risk stream as well. So much in insurance right now is about mitigation of preventing loss. And that's what Richie is indicating as well. We plan to also do digital health and medical devices, but all within this concept of wellness. And we're just beginning the process of putting together the mentors and identifying sponsors, and then announcing it officially in a few weeks. And then we'll be inviting ventures to join us. And I do think that there's going to be some overlap with the risk, because we're talking about platforms of health insurance, because you can't talk about health care, certainly in the United States, but really around the globe, without also talking about how to finance. So I imagine that there'll be some connections between the two. And then we also, not for next year, but I could imagine expanding the risk stream beyond the current 1 cohort to 2 cohorts. We have enough interesting ventures that we could definitely have 40 ventures in the risk area and not run out of great ideas. So those are the 2 areas that we're planning to expand.
Outstanding. Thank you. Thank you all very much. And I'm sure we'll be calling on you for answers to some of the questions that we already have set aside. And our audience has already started funneling some questions into the chat, which is terrific. But first, I would like to invite everybody on the call. I'm going to call your name, and if you could, I've told everybody I'm going to be polite but persistent in keeping us on time, so you have time for your questions. So I'm going to call you and ask you to tell us your name, your title, and your company, and just about an elevator speech, 10-15 seconds about what you do, what your company does. Carrie Thorn, can you start?
Am I on?
Yes, you are on.
Okay. It was just jotting that down, Kira. Carrie Thorn, Managing Director at NVNG Investment Advisors. We are in the market raising a fund of funds that has a focus on the Midwest with an emphasis on trying to bring capital to Wisconsin's startups.
Fabulous. Thank you, Carrie. Gail, are you on? Can you put yourself on screen?
Hi, yes, good morning. Gail Rowenbaugh, and I work for EDC, which is actually co-location with Wayne's Group and the Trade Service Commissioner. By the way, for those of you that don't know, EDC stands for Export Development Canada. We are Canada's export credit agency and responsible for working with the Trade Commissioner Service as well as large companies and banks in the U.S. to promote more Canadians within their physical supply chains.
Great. Thank you. Linda Likeness.
Hi, I'm Linda Likeness. I'm also a managing director at NVNG Investment Advisors, along with Carrie Thorn. As she told you, we are a firm focused on venture capital fund of funds, focused right now on accelerating growth of the Wisconsin ecosystem.
Great. Troy, can you join us and share a little about yourself?
Good afternoon. I'm Troy Vosser. I'm one of the co-founders of Generator, Wisconsin-based venture capital fund and startup accelerator.
Terrific. Joy.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hi, everyone. Joy Polito. I am one of the directors of the American Family Insurance Institute for Corporate and Social Impact. We are the other side of some of what Dan had talked about, really doing investment for social impact and financial return. And so I oversee one of the 4 focus areas, healthy youth development, which is really some of that healthcare that I know Joan was just mentioning, but also more broadly thinking about child development and how we're supporting healthier outcomes for young people and their parents. We also make investments in resilience, resilient communities, economic opportunity, and education.
Great. Joan Prince.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Hopefully you can hear me. My name is Joan Prince, and recently retired as of 3 weeks ago, Vice Chancellor at the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and have jumped right into it. On my business side, while I find this of interest is that one of my clients, we have been discussing diversifying individuals in all fields. Fintech was very interesting to me, and I had a conversation with them. So I'm very happy to hear about healthcare, and I'm the one that will take responsibility for that very long question in the chat. So the supply chain side of this is what I'm looking to get some information around. Thank you.
Excellent. Clint.
Hi, everyone. Clint Laskowski. My startup is Summary Medical. It's an insurtech startup started in 2019 to help insurance companies review medical records in a more efficient manner, and also to apply their underwriting rules right to the medical records. Went through the Generator G Beta program in 2019, and then the Global Insurance Accelerator in 2020. And Joan, I'm hoping there will be a second, or everyone, I am hoping there will be a second cohort of the CDL risk stream. So that's my story.
Awesome. Thank you, Clinton. When you speak again, we might need your mic just a little closer. Scott.
Hi, Scott Resnick. I'm one of the entrepreneur in residence at Starting Block Madison. Starting Block is a 45,000 square foot facility that's right below Dan's office here in Madison. And we essentially are the beacon for entrepreneurs in the city of Madison, providing the capital, resources, and mentorship to see startups grow. We currently have about 60 startups working virtually out of Starting Block, and those companies in the last year raised about $48 million in venture capital funding.
Great, thank you, Scott. Kelly Brown.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kelly Brown. I'm the CEO and chairman of the American Deposit Management Company located here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I founded the company about 13 years ago after starting my own bank. So you can say I'm a serial entrepreneur of sorts. What we do here is we manage money and provide full FDIC coverage to our clients that are in all kinds of different industries. What I find really unique about what we do is the fintech industry, as they're raising capital, has seemed to glom on to our firm. So as funds are raised, we hold the funds, keep it all FDIC insured, and then get it out as the startups or as the companies see fit. We work with a lot of companies that you guys may have heard of, such as Indiegogo and Kickstarter and LaunchBoom. We have a lot of clients in Silicon Valley, New York City, and in Texas that are in this very space. And we actually also have clients in Canada as well. So happy to be here. Very interesting topic. So thanks.
Okay, and Stephanie. I believe I saw that you're logged in. Yes.
I'm assuming you mean me.
Yeah, I do.
And that you didn't say my last name because it's very difficult.
Yes, can you pronounce it real quick?
Yes, this is Stephanie Norvisis. I'm thrilled to be here with you all today. Kara, thank you. I'm the VP of Strategy at Delve, which is a design and innovation firm here in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm also on the board of directors of Summit Credit Union. Delve is, as I mentioned, a design and innovation firm. We have three main pillars of our offering: strategy, design, and engineering. We work with Fortune 50 to startup companies. I would say about 60 to 70% of our business is focused on medical wellness, and medical devices in particular. And then the rest of our work is around financial services, consumer packaged goods, pharmaceutical, and sort of a range of different offerings. We focus on a human-centered design process, and we also work with providing mentors for Generator and are part of Project North. So thrilled to be invited to this discussion. Thank you.
Excellent. Dan Murray.
Hi, I'm Dan Murray. I am the president of Safety Net, which is a Fintech innovation lab here in Madison that is fully funded by CUNA Mutual Group. Also a member of Project North, and happy to see some friendly faces here on the call today. Joan has been an informal advisor of ours since we started our company, and several other participants on this call have been involved along our journey. So good to see everybody.
Right, thank you. Peter Gunder.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Peter Gunder, a recently retired senior executive team member at American Family, and I am delighted to see so many friendly faces. I am in the fan club of Joan Schmidt and Dan Reed and Joy Ippolito and Jay Agrawal, and and I'm certain I missed some others that I have had the privilege to meet over many years. So thank you for the opportunity to listen in.
Thank you, Peter. And Todd Lee.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. So my name's Todd Lee. I am the one Cincinnati representative on the phone here. So thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'm with Western Southern Financial Group, and I lead our Marketing and Digital Center of Excellence, and really focused on identifying strategic capabilities that we can bring in and help accelerate our businesses. We basically provide life annuities, investment management through a variety of different, properties across the country. So also want to thank the group for everything you're doing for the middle of America. I think it's great. Really trying to, break down the coast a little bit. And I'm interested to understand any perspectives anybody may have relative to talent in this new kind of virtual remote world as we move forward. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Todd. There are two other people who were signed on who are not part of the Consulate. I'm going to just call them out. I don't see that they're signed on, and I just want to make sure. Kamal, are you here? And how about Benjamin DeBoer? Okay, we'll get them information, and if they're interested, we will send them the recording of this event as well. We do have a few people from the Consulate who are on the line as well. Tina, I'm just going to ask you to speak up. Do you want me to introduce all of you now, or would you like me to do that at the end?
I think Wayne has us covered, but I appreciate that, Kara.
Okay, terrific. I'm going to start with a question for Wayne, and please add your questions into the chat feature, and I'll call on you to ask them yourself. Wayne, can we start with a brief overview of the current situation at the border? It remains open to essential business, but what else should we know besides getting out of the way of the Brinks trucks?
Yeah, exactly.
They're moving the money.
Well, there's been great cooperation between Canada and the United States at all levels on discussing how we can maintain the border infrastructure, make sure it's working properly, and make sure that all that trade that needs to go back and forth and essential workers make their way back and forth. And at the same time, respect the science on what's going on with the pandemic and limit discretionary travel or non-essential travel that's going across the border. So what does that mean for us? I mean, currently the Department of Homeland Security and Canadian border crossing agencies that are involved in this, along with public health, have extended the non-essential cross-border travel limitations through to April 21st. And that's due to a number of things that are going on, including keeping an eye on the new variants that are going on the COVID side and just continuing to watch the science, although we're really pleased that both in Canada and here in the United States, the vaccine program and what's going on with cases going down has been phenomenal. So we sometimes refer to it as vaccinomics instead of economics. That's what we're going to need to have in place in order to have that move forward. So we're very much looking forward to it. There were, prior to the COVID pandemic, 400,000 border crossings a day at 117 border crossings between Canada and the United States. Border crossings for non-essential reasons have dropped to less than 2%. Border crossings for business-related reasons or for moving truck and transport back and forth, depending on the border crossing, are anywhere between 97 to 98% of where they were before. So that trade's continuing to move, and you can fly into Canada for essential work. I will add on top of that, there is still a quarantine measure though in place in Canada, and so if you fly into Canada, there's both testing requirements and quarantine unless you're in one of those critical essential industries, in which case there's ways to facilitate it going back and forth. I guess the best example I can give is about 20% of Detroit's medical staff, nursing staff, are actually Canadians, and they cross the border every day. And that kind of stuff we're facilitating. We're making sure that works on both sides. Similarly, Canadians going into, or Americans going in to help with critical infrastructure and business in Canada. So that's working. But for the non-essential travel, the decisions on whether or not quarantine is applied is by our health agency, and as you can imagine, those scientists have viewpoints that they're trying to control the virus.
Oh, thank you. And I have one more question for Wayne, and then I'm going to ask Joan to speak up and ask her question. Wayne, Canada has a large and growing financial services industry, but I understand that there is room for more participants. Can you talk about expanding to Canada and how that's allowed fintech companies to access additional global markets they may not currently have access to?
Yeah, that's a great question. I appreciate that. Canada has a huge fintech industry, largely in 4 cities. I mean, it is there's a concentration in Toronto for Ontario, and in surrounding areas into Waterloo and Montreal, and then in Calgary and in Vancouver. And the growth of fintech jobs in the world, those 4 cities are in the top 20 cities for tech talent going into those jobs. And Toronto has led the way for the last couple of years on growth on both fintech companies and fintech hiring. And so part of that is because the infrastructure in Canada, Toronto, for example, has 44 universities and colleges that graduate, I think it's 40,000 graduates in the tech and finance areas every year that can go into that market, but also that you have access to tremendous tech talent that can come into Canada through our streamlined immigration process. And so if they might be having trouble getting into the United States, or if you have people in the United States that are on H-1B visas that are having trouble renewing, our process in Canada for tech talent is that you can have a decision in up to 2 weeks. So, if you've identified tech talent that you need that we don't have in Canada, and most of those tech areas we understand are growing so quickly that we don't have the sufficient needs, then getting those people into Canada through those programs is relatively straightforward. On top of it, we have a pretty robust area of trade agreements. Obviously, we just renegotiated the NAFTA, now called different things depending on which country you're in, USMCA here in the US, or CUSMA. I was a former NAFTA negotiator, so I'll call it the new NAFTA, and we won't do all those other ones that are in place. But we're also a member of the TPP, which is the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We have an agreement in place with Europe as well. So we have agreements with 51 countries through 15 major agreements that give you access to about $49 trillion worth of yearly trade. Those markets are incredibly important for being able to get into those 1.5 billion consumers that are in those markets. So the trade agreements are incredibly important. And when we talk about fintech, great hubs, great growth that are going on in those hubs, great access to talent. And there are a number of companies that have already moved up into Canada from the United States in order to set up those tech talent areas in places like Toronto and Vancouver.
Thank you. Joan, I would like for you to ask your question if you don't mind.
I don't mind at all. Hello, everyone. Very interesting topic and something that's actually has my brain thinking about something that I may engage in after this call. And I think that's the whole purpose of these kinds of roundtables. This question, which you can see in the chat, it's very long, but I'm really interested in the supply chain side of the talent, how we are developing the talent that is needed now and will be needed. And my question really is, are we looking at continuing the traditional, the standard sort of experience when it comes to education, or is there something new that we should be adding to the training, the education? I know that CDL has an apprenticeship program, but maybe if you could talk a little bit about that. So as I think about the supply chain early in the supply chain, what are some of the things that we can do and say to spark interest in this and to have that talent ready and ready to engage? Thank you.
Kira, should I take a first stab at this?
That would
perhaps?
be great. Joan.
So as you indicated, Joan, CDL does have an apprenticeship program, and it's designed for mostly young women to get involved in CDL. And recently we talked with a person in the Wisconsin School of Business who, interestingly, separate from CDL, is starting an entrepreneurship program for underrepresented individuals who are in high school and in middle school, because we understand that we need to get connected with people early in their lives so that, first of all, they understand that they belong at a university, and the University of Wisconsin is one that wants to invite people from all different backgrounds to join us, and then also so that they have the preparation. We also are starting a finance, so there's a finance stream and an entrepreneurship stream for these high school and middle school people that we're trying to get connected. And I think increasingly we're going to see higher education and education of all sorts change. So right now we have 4-year undergraduates. I personally think that we're going to see perhaps 2-year programs or 2-year programs with co-ops where people work and they go to school, where they take badges rather than majors. So I think that the world is changing, and we're trying to find ways to connect with the currently underrepresented groups, understanding that if we don't connect, we're missing out tremendously. And I'm hoping that at least partially responds to your question. You're asking if there are aspects that people need to participate in the program. I think that it never hurts to have more finance, to have some entrepreneurship, but what's most important is that people be filled with curiosity, and that we can teach almost anything related to the finance and the entrepreneurship. It's about wanting to learn, having curiosity, having an open mind that really matters.
But what, Dan or Wayne, is there anything you'd like to add to that about the pipeline?
Yeah, I have, but I've already spoken. So Dan, do you want to go first?
Well, I think that some of the question was about early skills. One of the things that I've observed is I'm going to sound like an old curmudgeon here, but the writing skills tend to be something that we need to work more on than I would have expected. So we're hiring for a couple of roles now, and one of the main things that we're looking for is someone who has an ability to write at a very high level. It's sort of outside of the typical things that you think about with fintech, but it's something that does come to mind when you ask the question.
Wayne, did you have one more you'd like to add?
Yeah, just a couple quick things. I as you mentioned in my bio, I am on a trade training institute on on their board as well. And I completely agree with both of the Joans on the issues of exposure, making sure that people recognize that this is an industry they can be involved in, making sure you're tapping into all of the talent pipelines. I mean, if you don't see yourself in the industry now, you need to have those examples that of people that look like you, that you can identify with, so that you know that those are those individuals that you can shoot towards and be involved. Particularly impressed with the idea of credentialing and micro credentialing, and how do you create the building blocks to bring people in that might not be able to just jump right into a 4-year program of university, but how do you bring the talent, and how do you build sort of continuous learning? I mean, I think you heard in my bio, I'm all for continuous learning, but continuous learning that brings more people in can include those other streams. And so I think that's important. And then it's just the recognition that a lot of things that are going on in fintech are becoming more and more visible to the people that are using them. You've got more and more consumer options in fintech, and I think that's going to help young students, whether they're in high school or even in their first post high school degree, thinking about, well, I think I can probably work with that. It's becoming more of a horizontal. So absolutely on the diversity, equity, and inclusion side, if you're not managing all of your pipelines, you're missing out. Talent's everywhere. And if you limit yourself to only certain pipelines, you're missing out on that possibility of talent. But you should also think about, if my talent has, well, a lot of what I want, but not all of it, how can I help train them? How can I get them into the industry as well?
Absolutely.
And Kira, if I could follow up on what Dan said, I missed it in part because to me it's so obvious. Communication skills come before anything else. And to the extent that we're able to support communication skills, and all of you are able to support that, that is critical to success. And the apprentice program, the students work with the ventures, and the first thing that we do is to get them ready to introduce themselves. So Dan, I'm 100% in agreement with you that that's such an important skill.
Absolutely. And Stephanie mentioned in here in the chat that she's a company looking to hire. They have a hard time finding talent in STEM, and so she's happy to hear about the efforts being made. I'm going to do a shameless plug for our STEAM Summit for Girls that we do every year. And you expect an invitation. All of you will be doing it this fall, because we're hoping we'll be able to do it in person this year. So we'll tell you a little bit more about that. It's a third grade to early high school summit, particularly focused on girls. I'm going to ask any of the panelists, but probably Wayne in particular, one of the best words in finance is consistency. I understand that Canada has had zero, and I was shocked when I read this, zero systemic banking panics or failures. Can you tell me why that is, and why it's important to Canadian and also international businesses?
So I'm going to scale that back a little bit, because I think the answer is that there's been none since World War II. So I think it's about 70 years that there haven't been any, but it's absolutely correct. I mean, the top 6 banks in Canada are part of the top 50 banks and most stable banks in the world. You know a few of them. They're also present here in the Midwest. I mean, Bank of Montreal, who goes incognito as BMO Harris down here in the Midwest, is one of those top 6 banks in Canada. CIBC is another one that just recently bought a private bank and is very present in Chicago and elsewhere. And then there's great connections between the other ones that are in Canada and here in the United States as well. Great cross-border work already going on with those banks. Part of it is the way that the banking regulatory system works in Canada. It's the way they deal with risk for banks and the way they manage their banks, and the regulatory structure has made it quite responsive. The country as a whole has done very well on making sure that they have control of their debt. We've got the lowest net debt to GDP ratio in the G7 for the last 15 years. It's about 26%. That meant that when we needed to intervene in the markets, like during COVID, and put money in for support directly to individuals, the stimulus checks that you guys are just doing, we've been doing all the way through, and they haven't ended. And we're doing the same thing with support to companies and making sure that they work through that. And that's very important. But the banking system is also based on having really large financial centers, being able to get the talent in that we need to get into those financial centers and have that growth go on. So the recovery is looking good in Canada. That's part of it for the banking system, but that's not, I mean, my comment is that the sound banking system in and of itself leads you to those strong financial systems, which then lets you move forward. There's one thing that's a little bit off topic that I'll mention, and it's happening around the world, which is COVID-19 has certainly made the regulators of banks think a little bit more about fintech and how they're moving forward their own regulations in the fintech area, which is fantastic. There's been much more regulatory sandbox work. The World Bank has really looked at that and said that there's been lots of ability for companies to move forward in that, whether it was digital payments, digital remittances, or just recognizing they need to think about everything that's been going on in that area during the last year, and how do they make sure that they allow for good understanding of the risks moving forward. Joan will be able to comment on that much more than I can. But.
Joan, would you like to add anything to that? Okay, and I'm going to go to an audience question. Todd Lee has, would you like to ask your question about enabling startups to navigate the cross-border environment?
Sure, we've looked at quite a few startups in Canada through one of our partnerships up there, and it's always great to see them, and they start out in Canada, but when we really start talking to them about, okay, entry into the US market, it always seems to be a little bit farther out, understandable. But as a Brittany, I'd be interested in your perspectives on, cross-border regulatory environment for kind of the fintech, insurtech, and the health tech space.
Is that, I guess that's directed towards me.
Yes.
Why don't you start with that?
Well, Dan, you've got a firm that you've invested in, Ken. Maybe you can speak to it a little bit.
I can, but I am going to follow you, and I'm going to try to add one single brushstroke to the painting you're about to paint.
Okay. My comment is that most Canadian firms, particularly in this area, are born global. They're born thinking that with their growth model, they're probably going to be looking at the United States. And so a large part of the sort of the thought process and the creation of the firms in the first place is, I'm going to do some business in Canada, but I'm also going to do some business in other markets, and it's probably going to be the US. And then you take a look at all of the major players they're going to play with in Canada, and they're all connected to the United States. And so that doesn't undermine your question about how do you get, when a startup is starting and they're thinking about all the variables that they're working with and all the things that they need to assess, they will think about the regulatory, framework step by step. But they've got all of the help they need and all the partners they need. It's very unusual to have somebody that grows only in Canada, but without thinking that they're going to be growing across the border as well. And so the vast majority of them do have a network that can help them, but you are talking about more than one regulatory environment. I think that's actually a good thing, because that means that that company is now ready to grow outside of North America as well. They can grow into Europe, they can grow into Asia, and they're starting to think about how they're going to manage the regulatory risk factor, mitigate it, and grow around it. I'll turn to you on that one now.
Dan, why don't you share your experience, and I'm going to have that lead us into a question about U.S. companies that have gone into Canada.
Yeah, I would say a couple of perspectives I have on it. The first is we do spend some time with Canadian carriers as well, and thinking about some of the things that affect transformation strategy to a U.S.-based carrier are the very same things that they're thinking about. They're scaling up data science teams. They're working on distribution. They're thinking about really the same challenges that we all have. So you would think that there would be more cross-border collaboration around the companies that seek to serve those transformation missions for carriers than there actually is. Your point about Canadian companies entering the U.S. market is a good one. We've had some success, probably more success with the companies that are less focused directly on insurance as a core part of what they do, and more focused on important components like artificial intelligence or IoT applications, things like that. The other interesting thing that we've seen is you would think that US-based insurtechs would enter the Canadian market because, like I said, there's similar profiles, but it tends to be sort of a late stage conversation with our startup relationships. One that there's probably some real opportunity there.
Okay. And so why don't each of you share an example of a company that started in the US but expanded into Canada? I'm sure, Wayne, you've got lots of examples, but Joan and Dan, can you tell us a little bit about some that you may have worked with?
Sure. I mean, the one that comes to mind immediately is a company called Roost, which was a water sensor company that we've known for quite a long time. They make a little disc that sits underneath your water heater, well, the water sensor concept in insurance is reasonably easy to understand. They their major client rollout was initially USAA, and then Desjardins was I think their primary customer now. But they jumped the border pretty quickly and rolled out quite significantly to that Canadian market.
Great. And Joan, and then we'll wrap up with Wayne. Joan, do you know of some companies that have made that transition?
Well, what I'd like to mention is I'll follow up on what Dan indicated. The regulation in the United States is complex and difficult, and with 50 states plus the jurisdictions, and each one a little bit different. And so I think that that's why we have the adjacent type of insurtech that would be more likely than the true insurers, because we have to educate the insurers and really go many steps before the new ideas are accepted. And so I think that's one of the reasons why we haven't seen as many insurers move from Canada to the US. But I do think, as Dan indicated, we see more of the adjacent, and partnering with an insurer is certainly a great way to make that happen. So I would imagine we'll see more of that.
And we are known at the Milwaukee Business Journal and American City Innos for starting on time and ending on time. And we just have a couple of more minutes. Wayne, do you have a couple of examples to share with us of companies that have crossed the border?
Sure, I'm going to give you a slightly different spin on it, and that's the number of large companies in the United States that have set up innovation and tech centers in Canada in order to capture and take a look at the startups and seed companies that are up there. And then they usually help them come back down again. People like Accenture, which is setting up its second, they set up a tech center in Toronto just a couple of years ago to specifically look at innovation and helping companies that are growing there and bring them into the US networks. They set up another one specifically in St. Catharines for an intelligent operations center in Canada. MasterCard put $500 million into a tech center in Vancouver because the talent was there, and they were able to bring those people in, created about 400 jobs there for looking at specifically IoT, Internet of Things, and artificial intelligence. And then HSBC, Matera out of Brazil, Louis Payments out of France, Brex out of the United States. They're all people that are active in this area that are going into Canada and saying, you've got companies up there that we're interested in, and we want to start setting up spots on the ground so that we can have a better idea. I think that's probably gives you an idea that there are a lot of Canadian companies where they fit in to people buying them. What's their growth strategy after seed and startup? I don't want to just tie it to you have to do it on your own. You're going to do it with partners, and your relationship with your partners is going to make the difference on how you're going to enter the market in either direction, to be honest.
Fabulous. I want to thank our panelists and thank you to Tina with the Canadian Consulate as well for getting this set up. One last question for everybody on the call. I would love the opportunity to share everybody's contact information with each other, but we only do that with permission. So if you would please just note in the chat that you are fine with me sharing your contact information with the other people on the call so you can continue this conversation. And I also want to let you know that there will be a story written about this conversation that will appear in Wisconsin Inno in the coming weeks. So please watch for that. If you don't already get Wisconsin Inno in your inbox twice a week, you really, really should sign up. And their American City Innos, I'm going to ask Kat if you're still on the call, how many Inno properties are there? Are there 14 or 15 around the country? You may want to sign up for more than one.
Hey there. Hi, everyone. We have 14 right now. We're adding Houston next month, and then we've got Buffalo, St. Louis, Miami, and Orlando coming all in the next months. So we'll be up to 20.
Just go to americaninno.com to sign up for all of them. It's completely free, and you'll get all the information in your inbox a couple of times a week. Thank you all very much. I would also love to meet one-on-one with any of you, and if you would like that as well, just drop me a note. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kara.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.